Thank you for joining. I see a bunch of new names here, which is great. And this is our last formal workshop of our Working for Yourself, Turning Your Passions into Profit series. So today, Lindsay, can you hit the next? So today we're talking about operating smoothly, managing your time and money. And we know from speaking to many students and alums who are out on their own, building their own practice business venture, it is a tremendous challenge figuring out how to do everything and also how to keep yourself, let's say, financially viable, both personally and professionally. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And we have a very distinguished panel. And before we go into that, starting the week of March 20th, we are going to have some of our panelists from the last 5 workshops and our experts offering open mentoring hours for any of you who are working on starting your own initiative, thinking about it, have already started and looking to get to the next level of growth. So we will be posting basically a Google Sheet starting the week after right after vacation, Monday the 13th, I believe it is, where we will post hours and days where certain mentors will be available and give you the opportunity to sign up for one-on-one time with them. And this is a tremendous opportunity. I thank all the experts who are volunteering, and I strongly urge you to take advantage because this is something that's rarely available. So we will get that up on the 13th and the meetings will start the week of the 20th. So our very distinguished panel today, first up is Mr. Carl Kraus, who is Interim Director of SBDC here at Temple University. He is also, if I get this right, founder or managing partner of Material Growth LLC, which is a consulting firm. And he also has a son who is a, shall we say, gig jazz musician out on the West Coast. So he's been involved in this whole area from multiple venues. Next, we have Abby Guido, who has several roles. She's actually, I believe, interim department head of graphic and interactive design. She is creative director of Abby Ryan Design. And she is one of these rare, cherished people who is educated both in fine arts and in business. And Abby has kindly agreed to both participate as a panelist today, but also moderate the panel. And next up is Emmy Award-winning Ben Thomas, who is, again, has multiple roles. He's CEO and engineer of After 5 Studios. He also has, I believe, Benjamin Thomas Productions, and he is wearing his Temple sweatshirt, just rimming with cherry pride today. And so they will provide you a ton of insights. What we will do is after they present, which should go to about 5 to 6 or 6 o'clock, we will break up the participants into breakout rooms, and we will place one of the panelists in each of those rooms so you can ask questions on a more informal basis. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Abby.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan, for the introduction. Hey, everyone, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm excited to be here for this panel and to share what I've experienced and what I know with you all, and hopefully get to meet some of you at the end and hear more about your own ventures. We're going to start. Alan did some great intros, but we're going to dig a little deeper and have everyone share a little bit more about their backgrounds. I'll just jump in first since I'm already talking. As Alan mentioned, I am the creative director of Abby Ryan Design, and it is a graphic and interactive design firm in Philly. Although my clients are really all over the country. I was out west for many years, so a lot of my clients are still from the West Coast. And in addition to that business, I also teach full-time. So I'll be talking a lot when we get to the talking about how do we manage everything, how do we balance everything. I'll have a lot of input there. But I'm going to throw this over to Ben next and let you do a little more in-depth introduction of yourself before we move on to Carl and start looking at some finances.
No problem. Thank you, Abby. So yeah, like Alan said, my name is Ben Thomas. I went to Temple. I graduated from Fox in 2018, specifically with a degree in entrepreneurship and innovation management. I am a music producer and audio engineer, so make songs. Currently, I live in New York, but I also own a recording studio in Philadelphia, where we have different clients. We also do events there and whatnot, and hope to help provide some insight on kind of the time management stuff as well, because I started all of this, while I was in high school, and I continued it while I was at Temple and even after. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. And Carl, if you wouldn't mind doing the same, and then also following that, I think we're going to have you jump into a little finance demo. I think you're going to share your screen and show us some more in-depth details.
Okay. Sure. Okay, so my name's Carl Kraus. As Alan said, I am currently serving as the interim director of the Small Business Development Center at Temple. The SBDC at Temple is an outreach of the Fox School to businesses in the community. And we work with small businesses of all types and throughout the entire life cycle of a business, from the inception stage or the formulation stage all the way through to exits. And these businesses are anywhere between 1 person and 300 people. So small business is still 300 people, allegedly. My background is in chemistry and material science, and I did that for 25 years in corporate America, and then decided I had enough of that, and went and started the consulting firm Material Growth Partners, and we work on companies that are commercializing early stage technologies. So very early stage stuff, different types of technologies, and very risky for an investor. So we basically work on identifying where those risks are for the investment community so they can make a decision if they want to put money into it or not. I've been with the SBDC here on a part-time basis since 2005 and started full-time in 2019. At the same time, started teaching as an adjunct in the Innovation Entrepreneurship Institute programs. So Ben, you missed out. You didn't get me. Sorry. It was after you graduated. My wife and both my sons are Temple graduates. They're all Owls. So I've gotten to pay 3 tuitions, but I've never actually gone there myself. But yeah, we are a Temple family. And as is my daughter-in-law, in fact, she was a Tyler graduate. As Alan mentioned, my older son is a jazz musician out on the West Coast, out in LA. He's doing that now along with working a full-time job, because his career he was a touring musician, and the COVID kind of just got him completely and kind of killed the income for a couple of years. So he is doing a combination of things now and still playing quite a bit, both recording and playing in the LA area. My other son graduated with a degree in mathematical economics and a master's in financial engineering. So they're both very different from each other, but both live in Southern California, about 15 minutes from each other. So, as Alan said, yeah, with Max being my older son, being a musician, I've had to work with him quite a bit in working his financials so that he's able to manage things. And we're going to go through some of that this evening. I won't dig too far into the numbers for you. I've also had to develop systems to be able to manage my consulting firm. I actually had a second consulting firm that was involved in technology, and that was a partnership. So there was two of us I had to worry about instead of just one. I've worked with, in my time with the SBDC, I've worked with about 600 clients, most of which were single entrepreneurs or, mostly single entrepreneurs. I've worked with many larger companies as well, but most of that 600, I'd say 552 or thereabouts were single entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of things that I've seen, a lot of challenges that these people have encountered, a lot of mistakes that they've made, a lot of mistakes I made starting out. And so, I'm basically, what I'm going to do is spend a little time here just as an introduction to kind of help you to avoid some of those mistakes. Hopefully, that's my goal anyway.
Great. Carl, I jumped ahead too. Before I have you share your screen, I'm going to ask a little more about some journeys.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to pause on you for a second because you kind of already did it for us. And Ben, you started to talk a little bit about how you started back in high school, which I think is definitely unique, but there might be some folks on here today who have a similar path. So would you mind describing a little bit of that journey of how that began, how school kind of maybe helped you make decisions on what path to go and where you landed now?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in high school. That's when I kind of discovered music. I played in a band. I'm very happy there's no footage of me playing in this band, right? But
that you know of.
Yeah, but I started making songs with friends in high school. I went to a music camp run by the Recording Academy, the people that do the Grammys, and then from there it kind of inspired me to want to make songs. And so I turned my mom's basement into a studio in high school. So I built a studio with one of her friends who's a contractor, and then I decided to go to Temple. But throughout this time I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to do music full time. I actually wanted to work on Wall Street when I was at Temple, and I ended up, while I was at Temple, I had a studio in my mom's house, which eventually became a studio in my house off campus. I worked at some other studios in Philly, but I also was interning at First Trust Financial Resources, a wealth management company downtown. And I did an internship at Deloitte one summer. So I was kind of very just between the more traditional kind of corporate route and the music one. I ended up getting a full-time offer from Deloitte. I deferred it for 8 months. And then 2 days before I would have to have moved to DC, I called them and told them I wasn't going to go. It was a decision. It turned out to be a good decision. It didn't seem like that for about 8 months. The music thing was not working as well. I'd worked with some larger artists, but nothing was really materializing, especially financially. It wasn't. And then 2020 is when things kind of started changing. That's when I started working with some much larger artists, and then I got linked in with Lil Uzi and right in the beginning of the pandemic, and then I've just been working with him since. And then that's kind of when everything is kind of snowballed. But it was definitely a hard decision to turn down the guaranteed money and the path, especially because I really enjoyed the work that I did, whether it was the finance stuff or the consulting stuff. I really enjoyed it. So it wasn't one of these situations where I hated it, and then I was just doing it to fund the music. If I had never discovered the music stuff and discovered the entrepreneurship, I would have definitely went down that path. So that's just kind of a brief overview.
That's really interesting. It kind of answers my next question, which is, did you always plan on doing this? But it sounds like you had other plans and had to ultimately make a decision to end up here.
Yeah, so it's a testament to my mother. She actually this is not normally how these things go with parents, but she actually was the one that pushed me to turn the job down and to continue doing the music thing. Specifically because I had a small amount of traction early, but also because it was something that was very finite. Corporate opportunities, they don't really go anywhere. I don't foresee a company like Deloitte going out of business in the next 50 years, you know what I'm saying? So, but the momentum that I had built, whether it was through music or even in the early stages of the studio, it wasn't the current version of the studio that I have now. That was something that needed to be capitalized on in that moment and to move forward with that momentum. So was why I decided to kind of go down that path.
I think that's really great. I think for folks to hear, there's when you are at that age, you don't necessarily have the same financial responsibilities that you might have later in life. So sometimes it gives us the opportunity to take those risks. So I'm happy your mom encouraged you to take the risk and to get going. It seems like.
Yeah, I feel like you have to take the risk. I think I had some people around me saying like, oh, we'll just go and like do the job for 2 years and then save some money and then but then your lifestyle, you get accustomed to a certain type of lifestyle and it's very hard to walk away from that. You have obligations because you've been living in a different city and working somewhere and friends and, bills. And so I didn't have any of that really. I lived in like a tiny apartment in Philly that was like my apartment and my recording studio. I had like a closet. It all cost under $1,000, a month. So it was manageable.
I think it says a lot that you took that risk so young. I remember myself, and when I graduated, my first degree is in graphic design, and I got a traditional job in New York. And I can remember sitting at my desk, but hearing my then boss in a meeting with a client. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm never going to be able to do that. Like, he was just selling it and it just seemed so natural. And the truth is, like, a few years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. And so I think it's great that at such a young age, you were able to have those experiences that gave you that confidence.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I'll say one last thing about that.
Absolutely.
So when I was at Temple, there's a class, I don't know what it's called now. It's like a business professional development class, where like they teach you like how to write emails and like that type of stuff. So the teacher from that class recommended me to this program called MLT. It's Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And they take like the top 200 to 300 Black and Latino business students from like all across the country. And it's like, this is how I got my internships and job offers and stuff. It's like a career acceleration program for, high achieving minority students. But the thing about it was, for me, like, I was the only one that was on a non-traditional, that had any aspirations of any of that in this program. And so I made friends and whatnot. And so everybody kind of had, right after school, they have similar types of opportunities. They're going to work on Wall Street or, big tech companies or big consulting companies and whatnot. And I'm kind of seeing their lives like on social media, and they're like making 80, 90, $100,000 at 21, 22, 23, right? And I'm not anywhere close to that because I decided to go down the music thing. And so it was like really wreaking havoc on my mental. And so I ended up unfollowing everybody from that program on Instagram because I needed to get like that clarity so that I could continue to go down my path and not like be jealous and feel like I made the wrong decision because I'm looking at other people's paths,
Well, and I think that, what you said was right. That's always going to be there. And I think for a lot of us, like with my, kind of journey, is that I worked for other small businesses. And I always consciously decided to work for small firms because I knew at some point I wanted to work for myself, and that by getting jobs at smaller firms, you end up having your hands in a lot more, right? You're more likely to get to see those contracts being made because you might be working on them, because everyone needs to kind of all hands on deck certain times. And so I always worked in small firms so that when I went off on my own, I kind of already had this set of resources that I could pull from. And so that's kind of how I ended up starting my own business before going back to teaching as well, which I, in my head, always wanted to teach. I didn't know if it would be in a full-time capacity like I am doing now. But this is where I'm at. And it's great now because now I get to not only still have my own business, my own clients, I get to teach, but I also get to help my students and other students like those here tonight kind of consider this career and the idea of working for yourself. And, who doesn't right now want to buy a van and go work on the road like all the people I follow on TikTok are doing, because it looks really appealing to me. Great. So Cara, I'm going to jump back to you and I'm going to let you kind of walk us through those starting up, how to manage your finances.
Okay. And just before we do that, just, my backstory, as I said, I started out as a chemist, and I was every bit the stereotypical chemist. Couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't, that type of thing. Couldn't sell anything. And through my career in corporate America, I got exposed to I was fortunate enough to get exposed outside the laboratory. I got moved out of the laboratory within about 5 years and got exposed to a lot of different things, learned things, and started several companies within these larger corporations. So I got to start my 1, 2, 3-person company in a safe place. You know, I had financial backing. I was getting a salary. I didn't have to earn my salary with the company, kind of thing. But able to learn exactly what you were talking about, you know, doing everything, you know, washing the dishes as well as cooking the burgers, kind of thing. And so when I got to the point of, you know, 22, 23 years down the line, gone through my 3rd or 4th corporate downsizing because of bad financial decisions by the finance people in charge, that kind of thing, decided that, gee, I've been doing consulting, essentially bouncing from company to company and doing things, setting up new companies, that kind of stuff. And that gave me the impetus to go out and try it for myself. And so, yeah, was able to get the nerve to launch. It didn't hurt that I had a wife who was working a corporate career. And so again, I had my benefits, all that kind of stuff was all covered, which was, you know, again, you know, sort of like Ben was talking about, you know, his mother, you know, encouraged him to follow this. And, you know, my wife, you know, at a much later age encouraged me to follow this, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically how I ended up getting into this mess that we call, you know, consulting and entrepreneurship, and kind of learned by doing a lot. So
I think some of those points that you're about, you know, the encouragement, but also having, you know, benefits. Something else that I wanted to share to add on to that, when I jumped into working for myself, I also took just a part-time 2-day-a-week design job. And it was enough money to cover rent. It was bare minimum. But I think that that's also, you know, important for people to hear, like, you know, not everyone has the means just to try it and not have anything to fall back on. And so there's many different ways of kind of having that nest, something behind you so that you can take these risks.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, let's just kick into this because that feeds right into what I was going to talk about. And hopefully everybody can, you're seeing my email, right?
We're seeing your self-employment checklist.
Yep,
Oh,
we
okay,
can see the checklist.
For some reason, it came up with my inbox on the screen. Let me try that again. Okay. There we go. For some reason, it's not showing me that screen, but that's fine. So, when you're working for yourself, there are, you know, several things that you need to worry about that you don't maybe normally worry about. Certainly worry about saving to make sure that you have some money in the bank to fall back on. And, you know, but you want to look at budgeting, you want to look at managing cash flow. And cash flow is exactly what it sounds like. It's money flowing in and money flowing out. If you have more money flowing in than you have money flowing out, you're doing pretty good. If the reverse is the case, you're going to run up debt and you're going to end up in trouble. So managing that cash flow and making sure that you have sufficient money to pay your bills every month so that you don't run up interest-bearing debt and things like that is important. You also have to worry about paying taxes. If you're an employee, the company that you work for is responsible for withholding and paying taxes for you during the year, so that at the end of the year, beginning of the following year, when you file taxes, you either get some money back as a refund or you owe a little bit of money because they didn't withhold enough out of your salary. If you're working for yourself, you need to do that withholding and you need to make sure that it's paid to the government so that you don't fall behind in the taxes that are owed to the government. And then you need to, you know, among other things, I know that most of you are very young at this point, but you need to start planning for retirement now. You've heard all the fears about the Social Security situation, and Social Security is not going to be around and all that kind of thing. And so, you know, it's going to be different. We know that much because it can't sustain the way it is now. So you need to be planning for retirement very early. So what are some of the challenges that you end up with when you're looking at being a freelancer, being self-employed? The first one is uneven and uncertain income. And Ben kind of touched on this, that you don't know, from when you're first starting out, especially, you don't know when your next pay is going to come. You don't know when the money is going to arrive, when you're going to get your first job, your first gig, that kind of thing, and then when you're actually going to receive the money. And you don't know how much you're going to be making month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. You're going to run into unexpected business expenses. Plans don't always work out the way you expect them to. Things happen, things come up, and you end up with expenses you hadn't planned on. There's variable profit margins, and profit margin is the percent of a sale that you're able to keep, the profit that you make from each sale. So, in some cases, you may be selling a product, say, and that product costs you $100 and you're able to sell it for $200. Great, so you're making $100 profit on that. Other times you may run into problems and it actually costs you $150 to make that $200 product and you only make $50. So that's variable profit margins. And then there can be unexpected interruptions, your personal illness, family issues, things like that. If you take a vacation, if you decide to go off, into the mountains for a week, that's a week that you're not going to make money because you're not working. Things like that. So there's all these unexpected interruptions that can result in issues for you. And then taxes. We talked about that a little bit, or I talked about that a little bit in the last slide, that you need to be able to put aside money for taxes because you're going to have to make sure that at the end of the year, you have enough to make that, to make the payments that are necessary to be able to pay your taxes. Another thing that you need to worry about, if you're selling a product of some type, if you're making jewelry, for instance, and you're selling artisanal jewelry, you have to worry about making sure that you're charging and remitting the sales tax associated with that product. So there's all these issues that you need to at least be aware of. And then when you're your own, when you're working as a solopreneur, as a solo entrepreneur, freelancer, you need to worry about money management. And I think there's some courses now that are in the university. I don't think they're nearly sufficient enough from what I've seen and heard from talking to my kids as well as some of the other students. You need to worry about your personal money management. One of the first things you need to do for your business is set up a separate bank account. You have a business and you have your personal stuff. You need to keep them separated. So you have two bank accounts now, one for your personal expenses, one for your business expenses, your business income. You need to create a personal budget. You need to know how much you're going to need each month and each year to support your life and to support your lifestyle. You have to make a decision on what lifestyle you want, what level of expenditures you want, but you need to create that personal budget so you know each month roughly how much money you're going to need to have available to be able to pay your bills. We already talked about reserving money for taxes. And then you need to pay yourself. So you have a budget, say your budget says that you need $2,000 a month to live on, pay your rent, your utilities, your food, all that kind of stuff. You need to pay yourself that. And the way you do that is you take your business bank account and you write yourself a check or just do an electronic transfer to your personal bank account. And then you spend the money out of your personal bank account. Never, ever try to pay your electric bill out of your business bank account. That makes all sorts of problems when it comes to tax time. Always transfer money to your personal account first and then pay out of your personal account. You want to make sure you set up an emergency fund. Like I said, you get ill all of a sudden, you need to make sure that you have enough in your emergency funds to be able to cover the expenditures that you have from your personal budget again during that time that you are ill. Normally, they suggest, financial advisors will suggest that you have 3 to 6 months of expenditures in a emergency fund. You're not going to have that right away, but you want to start building up to that. You want to have a plan on how to get to that level. So again, if you have a personal budget that you know $2,000 a month, you want to build a emergency fund of at least $6,000, preferably $12,000, so that you can cover up to 6 months of an interruption in your income. As I said, you want to start saving for retirement, even if it's only $25 a month. Start a retirement account, get an IRA, a Roth IRA, something. You can also, as your own company, you can set up what's called a simple 401k or a simple IRA. It's a 401k type account. You can set that up under the business as well. But start saving, even like I said, even if it's $25 a month, get into that habit of saving for retirement. Because again, hopefully you've all heard about the power of compounding, but if you can start saving for retirement and start getting interest on that, or even better, investing in equities so that you get both dividends and the appreciation of stock over time. Remember, this is over long time periods because it's your retirement. Make sure that you have insurance. You need certainly your personal insurance, things like health insurance, things like that, insurance on the contents of your apartment, or if you own a home, insurance on the home. But you also may need insurance on your business. If you're making some kind of products that could have a, could cause issues with the user, something breaks, something, causes a fire or something, you need to have product liability insurance, but you need standard liability insurance for your business. This is the kind of thing where, say you're doing woodworking and you're out at a festival someplace, and you set up a small saw and sander and that kind of thing, so that you can be making products there for people while they're walking around. You can make something for them. Somebody trips over one of your extension cords and gets hurt, you can be sued. So you want to make sure that you have liability insurance to cover that. And then you want to continue to reduce debt. If you've got student debt, that type of thing, you want to start working on that slowly but surely, reducing that while you're doing savings too. So you shouldn't necessarily pay off that debt first before you build your emergency fund. You should probably have your emergency fund built as quickly as possible, so that you have that piece of insurance of knowing that if you go through a period of time where you're not making money, you'll be able to pay for your living expenses. So some quick business accounting, and this is going to be very simple. I just need to explain a few things, and then I'm going to show you a simple way to do this. So basically, revenue, that's your sales. That's the money that you collect from customers for whatever you're doing, whatever it is your business does. The direct costs are also referred to as costs of goods sold, and often just termed COGS, cost of goods sold. This is the costs associated with producing the service or the product that you're delivering to your customers. Your operating expenses are sometimes referred to as fixed expenses. These are going to be things like rent, utilities, your marketing, paying for your website, any travel, business use of your personal car, office supplies, emails, etc. So it's all that stuff that basically you're going to spend regardless of whether you sell one, if you have one concert that week, or if you have 0 concerts, you're still going to have to pay these bills. So that's why they're kind of termed as fixed expenses or operating expenses. It's the expenses to operate your business. If you take your sales and subtract the direct costs of producing and delivering what you're selling, and then subtract your operating expenses, that gives you your profit. That's accounting. That's all you need to know about accounting. Very simple. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and go over to the example. And I believe Alan will be sending this out to everybody here. But I have a worksheet that I actually put together for my son years ago when he first started gigging. And if I can find it on my computer, I will share that. There we go. Okay, so this is a financial workbook. So as you'll see, this is in Excel. It's all set up. Anything that's yellow, you can change. So all along here, any of these topics you can change. You put in your company name in this slot. So no, it's not going to let me do it while I'm sharing it. But you can put in whatever you want for these categories. And notice what we have, and we'll go to January here. What we have is income, and this is again your revenue or sales that take place, and then a bunch of different types of operating expenses here. Okay. So the way you would do this in January, say, okay, it is letting me do it here. So if we put in for 2023, put in the 1st of January, say you're a musician and you played something, you played a New Year's Eve event and they paid you after you got done after New Year's Day. So yeah, say you got $2,000. So you can put $2,000 in there. And say you had a group of 4 people. So you had to pay the other 3 people, right? So you paid each of those, I assume, a quarter of that. So you paid out $1,500 to the other people. That's kind of your cost of goods sold, because you got paid the $2,000 because you were the head of the band that was playing. And you have to pay the other musicians, which are the cost of producing the service, the product, the concert, the gig that you presented. So that's your cost of goods sold. And then over here, you can just make a note of who you paid, whoever that was. You also had to drive there. So here you want to put in, say that it was 150 miles away. So round trip, you drove 300 miles. So this automatically calculates based on the mileage rate that it was $196 that you're allowed to charge for mileage. Okay. Very simple. You put in how much you got and how much it cost you, both to pay the other musicians and your mileage. And that will calculate, and it says that on that $2,000 job, you made $200 in profit. That makes sense to everybody? Just give me a nod. Okay, good. So you continue doing that. So we'll go in, just as an example, we'll just go to February and we'll say, okay, February 25th. And say you did another gig at that point and you got $4,000 for that. Again, you had 4 people, you're paying them each $1,000. That's $3,000 coming out. And you drove 110 miles each, or 110 miles round trip. Okay, so on that gig, you made 890.
So I have a question for you, Carl.
Okay.
Do you recommend folks use this just for any business expense? So you might not have an office supply that's being charged to that income, but you just, had to buy a new toner for your printer. Do you just put that in as its own entry?
Yeah, so say the next day you then bought toner for your printer. We'll go along with that. And that cost you, I don't know what toner runs,
$500. It's expensive. You have color.
We'll do 75 for the black one. And you just put it in as expense. So, and then over here, just to keep track, and that's why you have these records, you say toner and office supply, or Office Max, whatever they are now. I forget what they're called, but just say you bought it from Office Max. So that you know what these expenses are. And up here, you would say where the concert was or where the gig was and who the other players were that you paid the money to.
Great. And this will calculate it all on the year tab. Is that correct? So at the end of the
so it's calculating it here. It's giving you the net profit before tax for the month. It gives you the totals for the expenses and the income for the month. And then if you go back to the year, you'll find it all there. Because
Great. And this
line
is all
here,
useful for tax time, right? At the end
this
of the
is
year.
tax time, right there.
Yep.
This is all you're trying to get, is this line for taxes.
It's
So this is
fun
an
to see how
easy-
you put it together because, and I'm sure a lot of us do, and I'm curious what Ben does as well, that I've kind of organically made my own sheet that does very similar thing, but it's built a little differently. So it's really fun to see kind of your approach and have the mother broken down as well.
And yeah, we'll be sending this out to everybody so that you have it to work with. It's a tool that you can use if you want. If not, you can delete it. That's fine. I won't take it personally.
Yeah,
And
I
that's-
just,
That's your quickie view of accounting.
that's
Did you have
really,
another
really
question,
helpful.
Abby?
No, I was just gonna say, I do something similar, and then I also made it so now I can just import my bank statements every month. Because that brings in all the items, and then I don't have to, at the end of the year, do it. I can just bring them in and I can place them where they need to go on the line items so they calculate it. So it's fun to see. Ben, what about you? How do you address finances?
So I use QuickBooks. I use QuickBooks Self-Employed to handle all of that. It's linked with all my bank accounts and everything. Gets a little complicated because of the studio as well. Because we originally were we didn't end up starting like a separate LLC for the studio, just because the building owner was going to be weird about transferring the leases. It wasn't going to work out. So I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of like the studio expenses and what I'm paying, because everybody that works there is contractor as well. So what I'm paying them and whatnot. And then right now, since it's gotten a lot easier for me because like 95% of my income is from one record label, right? I only really work with one person mostly these days. Yeah, so QuickBooks is a software made by Intuit for originally it was just for accounting for like big businesses, but now they have a new version that they released a couple years ago called QuickBooks Self-Employed. And one of the cool things about that specific version, one, it's cheaper, and also if you were to open it up, you link it with your bank account, you'll see everything. And it's specifically made for people who kind of do like smaller scale freelance stuff, where like you might not even have a separate bank account. You can choose like business versus personal for each expense. So that's how I keep track of that. And then I have a great accountant that I link up with once a year.
I think that's so great. Carl, what do you think about that? Do you recommend that folks starting out in self-employment do seek out an accountant to help them, or do you find value in them learning how to do their taxes themselves?
If you're starting out very, very small, you can do it yourself. It's very easy to do. Especially in gig type stuff where it's some kind of, and I'll call it consulting, where you're selling your services, your personal services, because your costs are very low. Yeah, your operating costs are very low. It's very simple. You're getting cash in, and by cash, it might be direct deposit to your account or a check, but you're getting cash in and you're spending cash out on a credit card. It's relatively easy to do yourself, and it gives you an understanding of how that money comes in and goes out, that type of thing. So certainly for the bookkeeping, using something even as simple as a spreadsheet operation, something like I just showed you, it helps you to understand how the money flows, how it works. As you grow the business, I am a big fan of QuickBooks myself, although as federally funded SBDC, I'm not allowed to make a recommendation to use for QuickBooks, but I personally do. That's all I'll say. That's a great tool. Again, it's really the next step up from spreadsheets.
Sure. I'm kind of funny. I'm the opposite. I started with QuickBooks and
reverted.
Well, my
That's a
husband in a previous job many moons ago implemented QuickBooks with companies. And so he was, we were all on it, but I did the math and the amount of work I was doing, a spreadsheet did what I needed it to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of it really depends on like using the tools you need. Like
Right.
you don't have to jump in and do everything. You don't have to get an accountant. You don't have to do QuickBooks. You can just start out with what you have. And then as you grow, you might decide that those tools could be
Oh, yeah, and that's what I did. The accountant came into play when I built the studio because we spent a lot of money building it, and I was trying to capture as much deductions as possible, if I'm being honest. So that's kind of where the accountant came into play, because even for with having a physical location, like, we depreciate the value of the equipment and like those types of things as well. And then
Absolutely.
Once you get into those more complicated things where you're no longer a cash in, cash out kind of business, but you have, brick and mortar that you own, things like that, equipment, like you said, where you get into more complicated accounting like depreciation and things like that, then definitely I recommend that clients get a accountant, get a relationship with an accountant. You may only use them once a year and it may only cost you, $500, $800 for the accountant, but it's well worth it because they will find those things like Ben was talking about, all those deductions to try to save as much money as possible.
Yeah, my decision too was when I started to have to give other designers 1099s and like does not have to worry about doing all of that, having the accountant does help. We're a little short of time. I want to pivot because I want to make sure I get to this. Ben, you just said something that jumped out at me. And that was about kind of managing everything, but also as you're doing all this work, you just mentioned 95% of your work right now is coming from one label. And so you're in this position as someone who has this work coming in that's great. You have the work, but how much time do you still spend on thinking about, okay, I have that relationship, but I still need to build my client base outside of that 95%. So how do you kind of balance all that?
Right now it's a little complicated just because I've been kind of working on one project for 3 years. I did not think it was going to take 3 years. But in the times, like in between times, I do have some newer clients that I've been working with. I think for me right now, and this is kind of with everybody, right? Like when you get started with something, it's like you're casting the super wide net and you're like reaching out to everybody you haven't found, especially in something like your music engineering or music production, where there's like lots of different angles you can take, right? Like, so for me personally, like I've worked on every type of genre, but I've also worked on like movies, TV shows, podcasts, like editing, recording, mixing, mastering, making beats, like doing live sound, like I did it all at first because I knew I wanted to do something in the music realm or just in the audio realm. It didn't have to be music. But then as I got more clients, got more successful, I started to kind of narrow the focus down to now I really only do 2 things, right? I only like mix songs, which is like the post-production part of songs, or like compose music, like making beats and stuff. I don't do anything else outside of that. And I mean recording, but that's just for one person. I don't take on any other recording clients. I don't do live sound. I don't do any of that stuff, right? Because for me, it was about, once I got to a certain level, it was about focusing on the things that I do best and also the things that I enjoy the most, rather than just continuing to try to cast this like super wide net all the time. And so I think that is super important to, like, at first you have to cast the wide net, but just starting to think about like, okay, I liked this type of project. I like this type of client, because something I've learned a lot, especially as I've continued to work with like large artists and stuff, is when you're working with like smaller brands, smaller businesses, smaller clients, like having this wealth of knowledge is very valuable. If you can approach somebody who doesn't have a huge budget and be like, hey, I can do X, Y, Z, this, and this, which you might not be very, very good at each one of them. But when you get to a larger level, the record label that I mostly work with, like Warner Music Group, I mean, I think they made $40 billion last year, right? So they can hire the best videographer, they can hire the best engineer, the best graphic designer. So it's actually in your benefit to get really, really, really good at something in that case, because they don't need you to do 5 things. They need you to do that one thing very, very well. And so that's why I think it's important to start to just, even in the beginning, start to think about like, okay, I like this, but I don't like that,
That's great, Ben. And Cara, I'm going to throw this one to you because you've kind of helped so many other entrepreneurs get started. What kind of advice do you give to them on how they do the same thing, balancing their current clients, making sure that they're keeping them happy, but also kind of thinking outside of that, what's the next project? Because that's in my industry, design. People will come to me. There's not always an ongoing project. They need branding, they need a logo. I do it and they move on. So there's always this idea of like thinking about what's next. So how do you advise folks to do that?
Yeah, so we usually talk about the difference between working in your business and working on your business. So when you're working in the business, you're in there doing your thing, whatever that is, creating art, mixing songs, playing your guitar, whatever it is, you're in there doing it. When you're working on your business, you're looking for that next thing. You're out doing the marketing, the networking with people in the industry to make the connections so that you can find your next project, find your next person to work with. Because one of the things, and we see this not just in creative areas and certainly not just in the very small companies. I've had several companies that have been, $10, $15 million companies that had 80% of their, in fact, this is a real example, had 80% of their business was making parts for Halliburton for the oil and gas fields back in 2008. And oil and gas crashed. And all of a sudden they went from they were a $22 million business, they went to about an $8 million business. And because they had no backup, they didn't have they were in a single industry and with a single customer. So I always encourage people to at least get multiple customers, have no more than maybe 30% with a single customer or customer group, that kind of thing. And if you can diversify into a couple different areas, even better. But again, that doesn't mean, and this gets back to what Ben was talking about, you need to be really good at what you do. But as you expand, you get people that are really good at something else and have them doing that. And that way your company as a whole, you may only be 2 or 3 people, but you've got a diversity of things you do. So if something all of a sudden goes south, in one field, you can pick it up in another field and work on that and support each other with that. So that's, basically you need to cut out some time to work on your business, not just in your business. And
Which I think is probably one of the harder things for folks to do, because we're doing this usually because we're passionate about it. And then you get so into your work that it's hard to know to take that time, because at that moment you're not making money, right? Like when you're looking, it's not coming in. So it's hard to be making those decisions. I'm gonna ask one last question.
So one thing, just to finish on that, one thing that I did in my consulting business was every Wednesday was marketing day. So I would work in my business on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I'd work on my business on Wednesdays. And that included my accounting, bookkeeping and all, but that was when I managed the business and prospected for new opportunities.
That's really great advice. I'm going to keep it with you, Carl, and ask you to share any insight. When we do have these entrepreneurs and we are passionate about what we're doing, it's easy to kind of lose sight of the rest of your life. So any advice and experience, because you have to be a happy person. You can't just put everything into the business. How do you balance, being an entrepreneur, working for yourself, and also the rest of your life, and not let, it take over?
That's a very good question. And I've been at this a long time and I'm still working on it every day. So it is something that you need to constantly remind yourself of, because you will go down into that wormhole of just, work, because it's passion, but it's also, as a solopreneur, you're it. So you're relying on yourself to build the business, to make sure you have enough money to live on, to meet your budget and all that type of thing. And so you need to constantly remind yourself to take a break. And again, doing things, for me at least, it helps to schedule things. So scheduling to, in the middle of the day, get up, go outside. Even if it's a lousy day, just go outside for 10 minutes, but just to get some fresh air. If it's a nice day, go for a walk in the sun, get some sunlight, things like that. But also making sure that you reserve time for the other people in your life. And that's typically because they're going to, you know, a lot of them may be working 9-to-5 jobs. That's typically going to be weekends and evenings and that kind of thing. So depending what you're doing, just carve out an hour or two in the evening just to spend time with other people away from work, that type of thing. That's kind of, I mean, no magic sauce there. It's just, that's kind of what works for me, because I need to schedule it or I'll never get to it. You know, I'll just keep
I mean,
working.
I think
So,
that is the magic sauce. I think putting it on your calendar and actually blocking out the time is really important, and, you know, and sticking to it, you know, not letting other people take it away from you. Ben, what about you? Do you,
This is going to be a complicated answer. So I'll try to be brief. But so the first thing is, let me just share the mistakes that I've made with this, right? Like, so as I spoke in the beginning, I did not believe in this for a very long time. And I had people who were older than me and knew better were telling me to believe in this, and I did not believe in this. So like when I was in college, I mean, I maybe went to 5 social events in those 4 years. I mean, I did 8 internships when I was at school. I mean, there were many a day that was like 8 a.m. to 5 a.m., right? Like I did that for months. Like it was work nonstop, right? And looking in the moment, I was like, this is what you have to do to like succeed. And especially, you know, the music industry is this like industry where, you know, it's like no sleep, like hustle. I did it all. And I can look back and say it wasn't worth it. I could have definitely have done 40 to 50% less and still been in the same exact thing. Now it's kind of hard to figure out what the 40% to do and which wasn't, what not to do. Yeah. But I do wish I had listened more. And so, you know, similar to what you both said about like scheduling things, I'll share like just a couple small things that I've done for me. Try to give me a little bit of that balance back. So something number one for me, I don't eat and work at the same time, ever. I've never done it. That is like a little way that I can put some sort of boundaries up. So like there are no working lunch for me, right? Like, so even if that's 15 minutes to like eat something that is away from the computer, away from the work, right? I don't eat and work at the same time. I also think something for me, especially, you know, being younger, I had to put some fixed commitment on my schedule that like I can't cancel, you know, because it's very easy for us to cancel commitments to ourselves, especially if it's, you know, the super crazy pressing work opportunity and stuff. And I did that for a really long time. And then this year I started putting like fixed commitments on my schedule that I cannot get out of. So like, you know, I'm from New York, so my family, I live in New York now, but so my family lives here, right? And like I have a 6-year-old cousin, and he has basketball practice with a bunch of other 6-year-olds where they don't pass and they don't shoot, they just run on the ball, right? And it's every Thursday at 5. So I have to be at his school at 4:30. I have to take him to this practice at 5, and I have to take him back by like 6:30, right? I cannot get out of that commitment. I can't call him on the phone, you know, at 4 and be like, hey, something work came up, I'm not going to be there. Like, no, his mom is actually taking on extra shifts at her job. So she's expecting me to be there every Thursday, you know? And so that is something that has forced balance into my life, because it's something I really enjoy doing. And it's a commitment that I can't move and I can't get out of, and I can't last minute cancel. Like a work call can't come, that's more important, right? I think doing that, like having that rule of like, I don't, you know, eat and work. And you can have that rule. It doesn't have to be like eating and work. You can be like, if I have a call, I know some people that are like, you know, if I have a business call, I'm going to walk around my neighborhood and take it, you know, just something like that, some sort of rule like that. And then putting those like fixed, immovable commitments on my schedule, which I know can seem like very scary, but it's actually been the opposite. It's been very freeing. It's something I look forward to every week. So I think that is like a way that I've had to force the balance into my life, because for so long I'm a product of, you know, I mean, I'm 27, like I'm a product of that like hustle culture, the stuff that you see on Instagram, like, you know, work nonstop and, you know, sleep when you're 50. Like, no, that's not fun. It's not worth it. And you'll regret it if you do it.
and it gets harder to sleep when you get older. So you're going to wait to sleep till
when
you're
you're
older,
50.
and then you're not going to be sleeping. that was great, Ben. No, I agree. I think, you know, some folks, feel like they're glued to their schedule and having a calendar is like too much. But I'm with you both. I do the same thing. I schedule time in my calendar to every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I have a 2-hour window in my middle of the day where I go to the gym, and I try to not let anyone else creep in on that time. And so I'm with you on that. But thank you both so much. And I'm going to pass this back to Alan to see if we're going to go into some rooms to answer any questions one-on-one.
Yes, so Lindsay will put everyone, well, you have to put yourself in the breakout rooms. And then once that's done, Abby, Carlin, Ben will put you in breakout rooms to talk to the audience in a more informal setting. So, Lindsay,
Yeah, just
don't
2
know
minutes, Alan. Sorry. That was
Okay.
that was very fast. I wasn't ready.
that's fine. We talk fast. I do want to. So one thing, we will come back at like 6:25 plus or minus about a couple other events, suitable points, FDLP points, etc. And actually, what I'm going to do just in the meanwhile for a minute, I'm going to skip ahead. Well, it's not quite a slideshow, but I want to talk about a couple other things just while we're waiting. We don't do these workshops on our own. We partner with people across the school. SBDC and Carl's been working on this since we initiated it about 6 or 7 years ago. We are thrilled to have Abby the past couple of years. She's great. She comes up with a bunch of new ideas. We also partner with the Career Center, School of Engineering, Liberal Arts, and Fox. So to all our partners, thank you. 2 other big events coming up in the next 2 days. The first is tomorrow, and that is the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, but if not, hold on here. I'm just trying to organize this stuff. Be Your Own Boss Bowl is a competition for business ideas that are sort of in the second stage. They're not initial thoughts. They are businesses or ventures you've been working on. You have a team. You're at the point where you can make some financial projections. There's over $100,000 in cash and in-service prizes. It's a giant program. You have opportunities for personalized mentoring, for pitch coaching. And the next workshop is tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and it's preparing your financial projections and assumptions. And even if you're not going to enter the BYOBB, I suggest you attend this if you can, because based on everything that Carl took us through and Abby and Ben were talking about, even if you're on your own doing freelancing or doing engineering, you need to understand what your cash flow is going to look like and what assumptions underlie your projections. So if you scan that code, that will allow you to register for that. And another big event is Thursday. So Thursday is the Social Impact Summit, which is a culmination of a year-long program. It is also the finals of the Changemaker Challenge, which are social impact preliminary ideas. We had 64 submissions this year. We have 10 finalists, 5 undergrads, 5 in the upper track, which are grads, alumni, staff, and faculty. It'll be a great program. And we also have a speaker at this session from Shift Capital. And Shift Capital is a real estate investment company that is a true multi-bottom line organization. They're doing a ton to partner with community organizations to help revitalize areas. They've been heavily involved in the mural project, if people are familiar with that. If you see all these beautiful murals on building sides, especially among perhaps communities that don't feel they have a voice. It's a way of self-expression. It's been amazingly successful. They've also done things in areas like Kensington, where they provide free retail space to start up businesses. So we'll have a managing partner from there, Nancy Gephardt, who was actually just voted the #3 most impactful person in Pennsylvania in terms of urban planning and social change. So if you scan there, you can come on Thursday. It is live at the 1810 Accelerator. We would love to see you. We have great food. Lindsay cooked it all personally herself, and it is great. So I will stop there. And Lindsay, is now a good time to do breakout rooms, or you need a little more time?